So I want to show you how to do a z-score, how to use Benford's, and how to look for duplicate invoice numbers and duplicate invoice amounts. So what I have in front of me right here is a list of invoices for fiscal year 2018 from this electrical contractor. So we want to find the z-score for these invoice amounts. And as you recall, the z-score tells us how many standard deviations an amount is from the mean of 0 in a normal distribution. And whenever you have standard deviation that's more than 3, then those are outliers, and those are amounts that you might want to take a look at. So how do we do this calculation? So I've already calculated for you the average and the standard deviation by using the formulas in Excel for those two calculations. So the next step is to actually calculate the z-score. And Excel has a pretty simple formula for that, which is the standardized formula. So you just pick standardized, you pick your amount, and then you select your average, and you select your standard deviation, and that will give you your z-score. So we have our first z-score, which is a negative number. We want to find z-scores for the rest of these values. So let's go ahead and lock down the average, and let's lock down the standard deviation, and let's pull this calculation all the way down. Okay, so a couple things I do when I'm working with the z-score. As you can see, these numbers are there's a lot of digits there, and they're not in any kind of logical order. So the first thing we do, or I do, is I'm going to format these, and these numbers are going to have only 4 decimal places to make it easier to read. Okay, that's much better. Okay, so you can see we have a lot of negative numbers and positive numbers. It's just everywhere. So the next step is to make this into a table. So I will go ahead and create my table. And the reason I do that is because I want to sort these z-scores. So right now they're all sorted by the date, but I want to sort them by largest to smallest. And there we go. And make it easier for me to look at. So you can notice that we've got several z-scores that are in excess of 3 standard deviations. So it's this group right in here that you might want to take a look at. Also, another way I use this is that I look at repetitive z-scores. So like down in here, you have 0.1088 numerous times, right? And these are different invoices, but they're all submitted on the same date. And I would want to know if any of these are a duplicate. I'd want to look at when the work was performed, and exactly what goes into this invoice if I have any details. Okay, so you can use the z-score for any population of numbers. It doesn't have to be an invoice amount. It could be other kinds of number populations that you might be working with. All right, so the other thing you can do is a graph of your z-score, and if you're visual like me, a graph is sometimes helpful to visualize the outliers. So we're just going to highlight these 2 columns, which are the amount column and the z-score values, and come back up to the top here so we can make sure our graph lands in the top. So we're going to go into insert, and we're going to go to this scatter chart. And I like to visualize my z-scores with this line scatter chart that has bubbles on it that gives me an indication of certain values. So I'm going to select that one. So this chart Your invoice values are down here on this x-axis, and your standard deviations are up here on your y-axis. And we can see that most of these invoices are falling below 3 standard deviations. We had a lot of little negatives, right? But when you get over here to above 3 standard deviations, this right here is your sweet spot. And again, these are the invoices that you will probably want to take a look at. Okay, so that's the Z-score. So let's go on to Benford's. And if you recall, I think most of you probably know what Benford's law is. So Benford came up with this theory that the first digit in any population of numbers should be a smaller number, or the frequency is that it would be a smaller number. For example, in a population of numbers, the first digit in that population of numbers, 30.1% of the time will be the number 1. 17.6% of the time it'll be the number 2. So, and it goes on down the scale where we get to number 9 is the first digit, and that should only occur about 4.6% of the time. So if you, in your population of numbers, in this case the population of invoice amounts, if I have a lot of invoices that start with the number 9, that may raise a red flag for me, because those numbers could be, or those amounts could be outliers. For example, maybe an organization or a vendor has a policy that any expenditure in excess of $1,000 has to have a special permission or go through several authorizations. So an employee who wants to maybe perpetrate fraud and direct those payments to themselves might be creating invoices that are $999 or $998. So that gets them under the radar. The same thing could be the case with the number 4. If you have a policy that says that any expenditure of $500 or more has to have supervisor approval, and you're trying to, and you as the employee are trying to perpetrate a fraud where you're directing money into your own account, for example, you might be writing invoice or writing payments of say $499 or $498. So that's another area you can look at. So let's see how we do at Benford's. So I'm going to put in a couple column headings here. I'm going to call this one digits, and I'll call this one count. I'm going to call this actual percentage. Oh, I can't spell today. And I'm going to call this one, let me go back and put the percentage sign in here. And I'm going to call this Benford percentage. Okay, good. All right, so the first thing we need to do is extract the first digit from every one of these invoice amounts, and that's pretty easy. You just use a left formula. So let's go ahead and put it in. So you have left, you want to pick your amount, and you only want the first digit, right? Okay, and there we go. So it's number 2. So if we double click on this little handle, we pull the formula all the way down, and we know what the first digit is now for every single one of these invoices. All right, so the next step is to count the number of ones you have: 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6, 7, 8, and 9. All right, so we use a simple count if formula right there, and the first thing we want to do is pick the range in the digit column. So we're going to go from here all the way down to 136. and notice that there is 135 invoices in this population. It's going to be important to know here in a second. And then we want to count the number ones. Okay, there we go. We have 34 of them. All right, so we're going to use this formula all the way down to number 9. So I'm going to lock down the range with my F4. Okay. Excuse me. And so when we pull this down, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it's going to obviously give us a duplicate formula, but we're going to go in and just change the last number. So it's going to be our 2s. This will be our 3s. This will be our 4s. This will be our 5s. This will be 6. This will be 7. This will be 8. And finally 9. Okay, that's good. All right, now, before we go any further, I'm going to put in the Benford percentages. Oops. There we go. And make those a percentage. Now I want 1 decimal spot. Good. Okay. In this count, this should be 135. Let's make sure it is. Okay. And we're going to find what percentage each one of these digits is of the total. So before I do that, I'm going to put a column in here so we know what digit we're dealing with. So we have, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And our total. Okay. All right, so let's do a quick formula of this. I'm going to take the ones and divide it by our total numbers. Okay. And we're going to lock down the total. So we can use this formula all the way down to there. Okay. Make this into a percentage and pick 1 decimal space. Okay, so this should equal 100%, and it does, and that should equal 100%, and it does. Okay, that's good. All right, so now we're going to do the Benford graph. So we're going to take the actual percentage and the Benford percentage, and we're going to go into our charts and click on all charts and go down to combo. All right, so the combo chart is working pretty good, but we want to change the Benford into columns, so all we have to do is select another cluster chart, and there we go. So that's looking pretty good. All right, so the other thing I want to do is put in a trend line. So I'm going to click on that plus, and there we go. We want an exponential trend line, and we're going to put it on the Benford percentages. Exponential is going to be a curved line. A linear is going to be straight. We don't want straight. So there we go. And I don't like the color, so I'm going to change it. So we'll format the trend line, and we're going to make that color black. Good. So we can see it better. All right. So you can see that we do have a lot of 9s here. The blue, by the way, is your actual percentages that you picked from your population here. We look at these. We might even take a look at these here. Our 4s are okay. So again, this gives you some idea of what outliers you might have. All right, then let me show you how to do the duplicates. So I'm going to get rid of a few of these things. See, I'm going to go ahead and make this table into a range. Okay, and then let me just get rid of the z-score thing here, and here, delete that. Okay, now I'm going to play around here a bit and put in some duplicate numbers just to illustrate this to you. Good, good. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look for duplicate invoice numbers. So I'll highlight that column, and I'm going to come over to conditional formatting and highlight cell rules and come all the way down to duplicate values. And some of you may not already know how to do this, but some of you don't. So I thought it might be interesting to take a look. Click on duplicate values. We're going to leave the light red fill as our indicator and click OK. So here we see we've got a number of duplicate invoices, and so obviously you want to take a look at those because they shouldn't be there. So let's also do the same thing for amounts. So again, we'll come over to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, go down to duplicate values. I like light red, so we'll leave it. And look at this. We've got a lot of duplicate amounts. Now that might be okay, and it might not be, because they could actually be duplicates, even though they have a different invoice number. Okay, so that should give you a few more tools in your arsenal to do an examination of a population of numbers.